We've made 5 games so far, but I think what's more important is that none of the games we've made so far have been perfect. Some of them have been questionable, some of them have actually been pretty good, but none of them have been perfect, or at least we the developers have messed up at some point in development. And I want to talk about that, go through the 5 releases that we've had so far over the past 2.5 years that we've been running our studio, and hopefully give you some tips on not making the same mistake that we did. And we're gonna start by going all the way back to the first game that we ever made, Forge Industry, an automation game where the whole hook was that it's an automation game without any conveyor belts. I think hook was really good. The problem is the first game we made was an automation game. I think that was a big problem here, is not understanding, if you're a beginning game developer, that you are a beginning game developer, and not having, not like the humility, we just didn't understand back then why that genre is so hard. And that's kind of the reason why I make those videos of like top genres for game development, even though some of you guys may be like, bro, who needs this? We needed this honestly 2 years ago, even longer ago, when we started working on an automation game, because there's a lot of things that you don't understand about game development when you're starting with game development. And we just assumed, we're 4 programmers. How hard can it be to make an automation game, right? It's just code. It's very hard, especially in terms of like game design, balancing and all of that as well. It adds a lot of extra work on it. And I think that is the big thing, how making all of these interconnected systems, because you're basically making a business application on top of making something that's visual plus fun to use, is actually kind of way harder than you think. This is why I'm also very much for small scoped games, because if you start off with a small scope idea, you'll quickly, like, it's going to be harder to make those traps off going and making a 4X game or an automation game or a grand strategy game as your first games, because those will take a lot of time. We imagined that it was going to spend like a month making our automation game. My God, we were stupid. It ended up taking 18 months. A second bonus mistake that we did here is that we started with a game jam version to kind of figure, can we make this game? And then we just kept building on that game jam version. Whereas this is a game, once again, hindsight, you need to plan this out a lot in advance. And then the problem and the danger, especially if these are the first games that you're making, is that you basically can overplan your game and just never end up releasing anything. I think we still got the better option out of the two, where either you just go in blind and not really understand the pain and misery that's lying ahead of you, or you go in and you overplan and you write the giant game design document and the giant interaction diagrams and class diagrams and whatever, only to never actually go and implement making your game. So start with simple games, start with horror, start with incremental, start with whatever you want. Just keep it small. Make a survivor, like make a streamer bait game or something, because the first game that you make, the challenge should not be to immediately make a masterpiece. The challenge should be to make something that is good or decent. Probably just decent, honestly, is already gonna be enough, and do it in a reasonable amount of time. 6 months, 9 months, but ideally not longer, because you're going to slow down your learning rate so much by getting stuck on this giant sloppy code-based project basically, and you just need to learn fast and learn quickly. You'll learn basically the most in those first few games that you release, and you want to get them out of the way kind of quick. You don't even have to worry about Steam releases the first games, honestly. You can just go for platforms like itch.io, but you just want to get through that process and figure out first, can I even release a game? Before starting and working on those like multi-year projects without ever having proven to yourself, I can actually make this game. After that game came out, we canceled a whole bunch of games, and then we finally ended up on our second game, Unicycle Pizza Time, a precision platformer, streamer bait, rage game basically. 1 to 4 player co-op, you drive a unicycle and you just have to navigate through a city. This has been our most successful game by far, earnings-wise, and it could have honestly been a better game. I have to be honest, with this game, we got extremely lucky. And I think that is the biggest mistake we did, is because we had set this artificial 1-month development deadline for ourselves, where we had no time to market the game at all. We sent out content creator outreach 2 days before the game came out. That was also the point where the game just was done for the first time. There was basically no playtesting, there was basically no marketing, no next fest, no demos or whatever, which meant that we launched that game with 500 wishlists. And I'm gonna be honest, we got extremely lucky, because we had a few content creators pick our game up right before the game came out, which meant that we then got blasted into new and trending, because the coverage like coincided when the game released. That is not something you can plan for. You should plan for. You should go the more safe approach. What we should have done is, okay, even if we had made the game in 1 month. We should have made like a smaller demo version of the game, for example, put the demo up, test it out a little bit more, do content creator outreach for the demo, then do a Steam Next Fest, and then do content creator outreach with like a 2-week early full game access basically. And probably we could have gone for like a few thousand wishlists then and have a way more safe approach. So the important lesson here is do think about marketing and do give yourself enough marketing time. I've made a lot of videos about marketing before. Normally a few weeks ago, there should be a video up there that I released about the absolute basics of game marketing. And I think that's a really good starting point if you want to consider marketing your game a bit more, how to use platforms like Steam and whatever, to actually think about and take a look at those. Then the next game that we made is kind of a weird one, and I know a lot of people in our audience wouldn't even consider it a game, and that is My Virtual Friend, which, like the name says, it's basically Bonzi Buddy if Bonzi Buddy was a cute anime waifu. It's one of those games that was like a prototype that I made because I was trying to learn out like how Unity worked a little bit myself, and there was like this game, I think Your Wife or My Wife was the name on Steam, that did like crazy numbers, and I'm like, how hard can it be? I'm gonna make this myself. So it is a little, you know, virtual girlfriend. And the game made like $1,200 or something lifetime, which is not great, but I think it's acceptable because we spent 2 weeks on making this game basically. I think the biggest problem we had with this game, because marketing wise, we actually had pretty good results here because we did the standard part of making a first playtest, basically putting it on itch.io, then working towards a demo, joining the Steam Next Fest, and then releasing the game. I think we released that game with 1,500 wishlist or something, which is actually pretty solid. It was just a game, and once again, it's always game in loose terms. That's a big problem, with no clear audience for it, because there wasn't that much, you know, I feel like it wasn't a Gooner game, even though it might look like a Gooner game to a certain degree. But it also wasn't a true like incremental like Rusty's Retirement like basically. And I think because of that, there was no clear way of us like, who is this game for basically? And we had some people buy the game, of course, at the end of the day. There was clearly some interest in it, but I honestly to this day do not know who the ideal person for this game was. It was more of a game of like, hey, I just want something that plays ambient music and then maybe has a cute waifu on the background, and then go from there, basically. This one probably, what we should have done is, back when I came up with the idea, I should have spent a little bit more time in the drawing board to be like, okay, how are we going to make this a little bit more of an incremental game or a little bit more of XYZ game, basically, just so it has a bit better of a clear audience, because that's what was missing right now. It just was... It was something, but it was never clear in what it is. The next game we made, is back to a real game, is Overtime Anomaly, which is a horror game where we set out to make an anomaly-like game, was the original goal, where you're spending 5 nights at an office after hours and you have to complete your work tasks and correctly identify anomalies when you see them. This is a game that I think we're kind of proud of, I would say. And it's a game where we put a lot of time and attention into it, but it was a commercial failure because we spent 4 months of development time on this. And I think it's earned like $4,000, maybe a little bit more, but definitely not break even at all. And I don't think it's going to hit it anytime soon. Why is this? A big problem we had with this game was, once again, kind of not really knowing what the game was to a certain degree, but especially player onboarding and player experience. I think that was the big thing. This was the first game where we were truly blinded by that all-knowing developer wisdom of having programmed every mechanic and every anomaly in the game without having done enough playtesting to see how does someone who has no idea how this game plays actually interact. Things like, for example, the reporting mechanic. If you see an anomaly, you have to report it, and then you have to report it in the right category, is something brand new, and it's something nobody really understood, is what we realized as well, of like making it clear what should the player do when they identify an anomaly and giving good player feedback once they spot that anomaly, yes or no. Second thing, once again, playtesting wise, is we had those 8 different assignments that you had to do randomly. And I would say 5 of them were pretty easy to understand, of like, oh, you need to collect post-its and throw them away. Those are fine. But some of them, even looking at reviews right now, this is the biggest problem. People just didn't know how to complete certain tasks. And once again, for me, those things seemed painfully obvious. For example, there's a task in the server room where you have a whiteboard and it says like, oh, connect A1 to B2. and you have to take a cable and connect server A1 to B2. But I know this because once again, I came up with the mechanic, but for a lot of people, it was unclear. Okay, what is A1? What is B2? Where are the cables? How do I connect them? How do I know I'm doing good? And all of that it just gave a pretty bad experience. And this reflected as well if you look at the playtime stats for our game. I think this game, we aimed for like a 3 to 4 hour gameplay experience, but I think the medium playtime is like 46 minutes. A lot of people did drop out of this game before they got far enough, I would say, in the full game. And there were some other things later on also playtesting wise where it was too difficult and too unfair. We ended up doing some fixes for that where you could like save your progress and whatever. But definitely a severe lack of playtesting was the problem here with this game. And that brings us to the final and 5th game that we've released, and it's also the best game we've released, at least in a audience reception point. The game is currently sitting at 98% positive with 54 reviews, and it's called Kyoto Anomaly. Because this game is an actual true anomaly-like, think games like Exit 8 or Shinkansen Zero, where it's a very simple gameplay loop. You walk through a repeating alley, you look at, is there an anomaly? Yes or no? And then you just choose, like either go forward or backwards in some games. In our case, you go left or you go right. You do that 8 times in a row and you win the game. We added some extra mechanics and whatever. I think the biggest problem with this game was honestly that it was a game that's released at a time that didn't really fit anymore. It was released at a time where there was no interest in this game as much anymore. It's kind of like releasing a 2D platformer in 2025, where yeah, sure, 10 years ago, a 2D platformer would have banged on Steam. Same thing with an anomaly game. If we would have released the same game 1.5, 2 years ago, when Exit 8 was right at its hype and all of that, game probably would have done a lot better. Once again, in this case, I think it's fine because we spent a month-ish on development time on this game because we could reuse a lot of code from Overtime Anomaly. It was a good game. It's just not a game that people were looking for. That was the big problem, I would say. And this comes down to market research. We kind of ignored the market research to a certain degree because we knew that we were going in with that buff of already having most of the systems implemented and just having to focus on the environment and the anomalies, but basically no new code had to be written. But if you're considering making an anomaly game right now, please reconsider, because I think it's really not the point in time to make these styles of game because interest just isn't really there. So those are the 5 games we've made so far and the lessons we learned along the way. I'm curious if you've released any games so far. What are like the core lessons that you've learned of like, what's the biggest mistake that you've made working on a game so far? Has it been just massively overscoping? Has it been making a game that in the end wasn't fun? Leave a comment down below. I'm always interested to learn more about you guys as well, get a better understanding of what the problems are that you're struggling with. So would be very interested to learn more about you. Apart from that, if you're new here, we're game developers. We make videos about game development and the things that we learn along the way. So if that's something that interests you, be sure to head down below and subscribe because you'll get notified whenever we upload these videos once a week. So that's all I need to say. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!